Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Welcome to Survive and Thrive, a podcast where we unpack compliance, crises, and disasters, walk you through all the red flags which appeared and give you lessons learned going forward. And for the second time, I'll remind you that I'm your co-host, Tom Fox.
And I'm Kortney Nordrum, Regulatory Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer at Deluxe Corporation. This season on Survive and Thrive, we're talking about compliance disasters, like Tom said. Unpleasant situations companies find themselves in because they weren't looking at the right clues, had their collective heads in the sand, or hadn't yet figured out how to expect the unexpected. Today's episode is all about how to survive a GDPR data breach, and I pray you never have to.
So, Kortney, you are in the land of 10,000 lakes, as we know from Ham's Beer, Minnesota. And we were recording this in late July, and you are digging your summer. And as you are getting ready to leave for a nice long weekend with hubby, Mr. Kortney,
Mr. Kortney.
You are cognizant of the fact that a couple of years ago you were appointed GDPR officer for your company. You're here in the United States. Europe just kind of runs itself. And so you learned how to spell GDPR. You listened to Quarterly Compliance on a couple of webinars because they're the experts. And hey, it's all going good. But you're going to be at the lake, and internet-free lake, because after all, it is July in Minnesota when all Minnesotans go to the lake. So as you're getting ready to head out to the lake, you get a call from the head of your European business unit, and she tells you that the company has been hacked. And not only did they get confidential internal data, it's unclear if they got the crown jewels or not, but they hacked your customer information and even got personal records on your employees, which contain personal identifiable information. And you say thanks very much, but your head is really at the lake already, and you'll get back to them Monday because you and hubby are getting ready to head on out for an internet-free lake weekend. Now, your phone is not only internet, you do have cell phone service. So as you're driving, you get a call, but the call is from a number identified as unidentified number. And as we all know, you never answer one of those calls because it's only going to be a scam artist or someone that you don't want to talk to. So you don't take it. After just a lovely day and a nice, relaxing grill by the lake and eating way too much food, for reasons known only to yourself, you decide to check your voicemail. And you do. And it's a frantic call from your European counsel asking you to call him immediately. So this is somewhat disconcerting. You do have cell phone service, sketchy at best, but some cell phone service. So you stand around with your hand in the air, trying to get a good signal. And after you get that signal and reaching towards the heavens and perhaps invoking the deity once or twice during this process, what do you do from a more terrestrial basis?
Well, first we're going to stay on the deity piece, and I start praying that my choice to go out to the lake has not hurt my company. As we know, this is a very hypothetical situation because we learned in a previous podcast that I would cancel my anniversary if there were a problem. So no doubt I would also cancel my lake trip if there were a problem.
Well, you're already there. You're already there.
I'm already there. I have no internet and I have sketchy cell service. And so in this hypothetical space, I'm going to immediately call GDPR counsel back and hope that it's not the middle of the night there. Although it most likely is. So I'm going to disconnect from reality a little bit because I know enough about the GDPR to be scary. But in the hypothetical, I don't know nearly as much. So I want to know why my counsel is freaking out and why they are very, very concerned that I get back to them quickly. Real Kortney knows this is because of the mandatory reporting deadlines that our friends, the Europeans, like to impose when there are data breaches. And no doubt my GDPR counsel, who is a prim and proper British gentleman, would most certainly make it very clear in the most prim and proper fashion that I have made a terrible mistake. They would never say that because they're British, but no doubt I would feel that I made a terrible mistake. So first step.
Wait a minute. Wouldn't you say that there's the summer in Minnesota weekend exception to any deadline? Haven't I've heard U.S. lawyers say that, well, there's a Thanksgiving exception. They must recognize the state of Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes.
Right. One would think they would, particularly during the state fair. So Minnesota State Fair, the best state fair in the whole country. And if you don't like that, fight me. So I think there should be a summer in Minnesota exception. However, my gut tells me that the European Commission's not going to align with us on that. Now, as much as we try, I don't think they're going to be really seeing things the way we see things. I welcome them to visit Minnesota in the summer. We have approximately 4 lovely days, and the rest are unbearably hot and or thunderstorms. So they're welcome to visit us. But yeah, I don't think there's an exception for Kortney going to the lake during a Minnesota summer.
Did you just say that if anyone disagreed with your assessment of the Minnesota State Fair, that they could bite you or fight you?
Fight. Dukes. They can
Okay.
fight me.
Just wanted to find out if you said bite me on a podcast.
No, I said fight me. You can fight me because I will fight to the death for my belief that the Minnesota State Fair is the best state fair in the country. So
after prayer, what's next?
After prayer is we call council back, and we see why they were so panicked, and hopefully they have a plan forward that can prevent the organization from getting into any trouble. Immediately after I get off with council, I'm going to call everyone on our incident response plan. And so this is really a plug for everyone who works in compliance, who might deal with data breaches. Make sure there's an incident or a crisis plan and that you have it set, who you're going to call, who's going to get on the phone, who's going to make decisions. All of those things are already set in a document, in a plan. So I just call the people and get everyone on the phone, because when things are urgent, that's the last time you want to be guessing at decisions you need to make. So I'd fire up our incident response plan, get our crisis team on the call. And first and foremost, as the CCO, I want to make sure that the bad guy is out of our system and that we're not continuing to have problems. So if we're continuing to be subject to a hack or be taken over, whatever the bad guys decided they wanted to do this week, then that is the main priority in my mind, rather than the reporting that is required from as a result of that. So in my head, and I would prioritize doing whatever we could do to get the bad guys out of our system. Once we're assured that the bad guys out of the system, then we assess the severity level. And with my CISO, we have, Tom, you're going to make fun of me again, a very Kortney way of assessing severity. I simply ask him, is this big scary or is this little scary? And he then tells me if whatever breach we have or data issue we have is big scary or little scary or something in the middle. Because I'm not fluent in technology the way that our tech folks are and our information security friends are, I need and rely on the CISO to break it down for me. What is the extent of the information security hack or breach. And that helps me then not have to assess that on top of all of the other risk and regulatory assessments I'm making. So I say big scary, little scary, medium scary. Assuming since it's GDPR and they got customer information and employee information, this is easily in the big scary bucket. Then we're going to start immediately going to how do we react? How do we find out how this happened? How do we prevent this from happening again? And how do we communicate that this happened in a way that preserves our reputation and meets all of the regulatory requirements? So we're going to see if we need to engage a forensic firm. Do we have in-house knowledge enough to assess what happened and track it to see how this took place and then take the steps necessary to prevent it from happening again? Or do we need to get someone to come in and help us with that effort? I think most of the time, particularly with ransomware, it's pretty common that companies are engaging forensic firms to help determine where the breaches come from. And when they do that, and when you do that, and when I do that, you want to do it under privilege. You want to be able to try to protect that which you know may be harmful. I will, however, caution everyone to keep in mind this week, and I don't remember where it came from, but there was a case that came out where, I want to say maybe New York, courts refused to allow forensic reports from a forensic software firm to be considered privileged because they were prepared to understand the breach itself rather than prepared for litigation. So this is not legal advice, but if I were you and I were engaging a forensic firm and I were doing that under privilege, I would make sure I was doing so in preparation for the litigation that is very likely to happen as a result of this data breach, and not just because you want to see where the breach came from. At that point, once I've spun up everything that needs to be spun up, I'm going to probably get my GDPR counsel back on the phone. I'm going to tell them what I know, which is going to be, we've got our plan spun up. The CISO says, this is how we think the bad guys got in. We're sure they're out, or we don't know if they're out or not, and we're working on it. We're going to engage XYZ forensic firm, and then we could have a discussion whether counsel engages them or I engage them as counsel, and then talk about next steps. Next steps are going to be determining which customers and which employees were impacted, and then analyzing the individual countries of residence. So we want to start figuring out where we're going to have to report. The European Commission itself is united that GDPR applies throughout, but each of the individual nation states has their own reporting scheme, and there is nuance in where you report and to whom. So for anyone who's ever gone through this, in this hypothetical, I would hope that we would be able to report in a friendlier country rather than one that it takes a harsher look at data breaches. So in other words, pray we don't have to report in France. Again, collect that information, figure out where we need to report, and then I'm going to ask counsel to start drafting. I'm going to definitely want counsel to draft the regulatory notifications. And then I would also ask counsel to draft notifications to the individuals affected by the breach, because these are most likely going to be Europeans. And as an American CCO, I have an awareness of European rules and law, but I'm in no way an expert on GDPR, data breaches, and all of the notifications that are required. And so I would ask counsel to set up and draft those notifications to the individuals affected by the breach. On our side, we're going to probably set up a toll-free number for questions, because we know once our customers and our employees get these notifications that they're going to be angry or sad or confused, or all of those together, and want to talk to us and ask how this happened and what we're doing to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. And so we want a number that we have someone who understands the situation answering that call. And then as part of our incident and response, we're going to work with the CorpCom team on any public notices or any sort of public response. So a lot of times when we see organizations getting hacked, you'll see it on a blog first before that organization says anything publicly. And so we want to be able to make sure that we're directing the message rather than having gossip and others talk about what happened to us. And those are all of the things that I would do before I went to bed at night and probably even before I made any s'mores.
Wow. Doesn't get much more important than that. So it's now 60 days later. And what started off as big scary is now medium. It went to medium scary. And now it's actually little scary because you feel like you were able to isolate the breach and go through all the regulatory hoops that you had to go through. And you get a call one day from a colleague, also a fellow Minnesotan. And this colleague says, we're concerned about our new European subsidiary around data breaches. Are there any lessons you could point us to around GDPR or general cybersecurity? What would you tell them?
First thing I would say is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So said in a less posh way, try really, really hard not to get hacked, because it's way easier to try not to get hacked than it is to deal with the fallout of the hack. And that's really, I say that kind of tongue in cheek because everyone's going to get hacked. It's just how it works. The bad guys are smarter than we are, and it's their whole job to be bad guys. And so eventually everyone's going to deal with a data breach of some sort. And because of that, I would say that you need to have in place a good system for awareness. So do you make sure that starting at the CSR, so the customer service representative, and like email help desk teams, that they have a way to immediately engage the right people if they're getting reports from customers on, oh, this seems weird, I can't log in, or I logged in and saw someone else's information, or anything strange. So you want to make sure that you have the right people able to ring the right alarm bells in your organization so that you're catching a data breach as early as possible. And then if you're dealing with European data, your timelines are really, really tight. They're fairly unforgiving. And so spin up your internal incident response team as soon as possible. It is one of those things that, like I mentioned before, you want to have a plan before you have to use a plan. So build a plan, build a response team, go through scenarios, test it at least yearly, get people on the phone. And because it's similar to training in the military, basic training, is that you want people to be able to make decisions and act in the moment in the way that they've been trained to act. And if you take away the options not to, and if you give people a plan and you practice your plan, then chances are they'll be able to act on that plan as we need them to. So make sure that you can spin up your incident or your crisis team or whatever you call it, your data breach team, quickly. And that the people who are on the phone need to be on the phone. The lawyer in me also says make sure you have a lawyer on the phone and that you run through privilege, what it means, and how to protect it while you're in those calls.
Well, that is quite a lot to digest, and hopefully lessons learned that you have communicated to our colleagues. I found I thought a very appropriate rallying cry that we're going to end our pod with, Kortney, which is hacking is exploiting security controls in either a technical, physical, or human-based element. I think that's a different way of saying what you just said. You're going to get hacked. and whether it's animal, vegetable, or mineral, you're going to get hacked. So be ready. That brings us to our time for this episode. Kortney, you want to take us home?
Sure. Join us on our next episode of Survive and Thrive. I'm Kortney Nordrum.
And I'm Tom Fox. Thanks for joining us on this episode.